Hello, I'm Gary Ivey, and welcome to the Age of the Kingdom series channel. On this episode, we are going to take just a look at the recent book signing that I had at Kona Stories bookstore in Keauhou, Hawaii, where I got to talk about all things Age of the Kingdom. So let's get right into it. There are a couple of people here who have read the books that I talked about in 2018, the Backlash series. And tonight I'm going to talk about Age of the Kingdom, which is a series that I'm writing. It's going to be 5 or 6 novels. I haven't completely decided yet, but the first 2 are based on the time in history when King Saul was king of Israel 3,000 years ago. Just think about that, 3,000 years ago. You know, 1,000 years ago, what was going on? The Crusades, the Tahitians hadn't come to Hawaii yet. 2,000 years ago, the 2 JCs of history, Jesus Christ and Julius Caesar, were being betrayed and murdered. And 3,000 years ago, there was 120 years when the nation of Israel was a united kingdom under 3 kings. Each one of them reigned about 40 years. And so the Age of the Kingdom is about that period of time. After the 3rd king, King Solomon, died, the nation broke apart into 2 pieces and never reunited until the great empires of the time swept them away. And so that's the period of time that we're talking about. And so why in the world would someone want to write fiction based on the Bible? Some people think the Bible is it's either for children or it's for fragile church ladies because it's just boring. But these stories are not boring. There's royal rivalries and assassination plots and bloody battles and betrayal and rape and suicide. And I mean, it's like the original Game of Thrones. And the people who have read the first book, the men enjoy it. Some of the women have a little trouble because I don't pull any punches. The battles are told like they were. And I grew to love these stories when I was a child. And the more I got into them, the more interesting they got. And so I've done a lot of research into the culture and the archaeology and what it's taught us about that time period. And to me, it's just very fascinating. But then I'm a nerd, so maybe not everybody would agree. But early on, when I started writing and talking about this series, I put a post on social media somewhere, and I called it Biblical Historical Fiction. Now, of course, historical fiction is a big genre, but I just put biblical in front of it. And somebody commented, everything in the Bible is fiction. And I could have responded with a good dose of snark, but I decided that would not be very Christian, and so instead I didn't respond. But if I had, I would have said something to the effect of, "Your information is about 50 years behind the times," because it's been just in the last few years, really since the 90s, that some really amazing archaeological discoveries have come along. Up until 1993, the default position of scholars was that King David never lived. He didn't exist. That was the default position. Until 1993, when they discovered the Tel Dan Stela. And I'm going to explain each one of those words. A tell is where they built a city, it was destroyed, they built it again, it was destroyed, they built it again, it was destroyed, and it just keeps going up until there's a mound, and that's called a tell, and they're all over the Middle East. Dan was one of the sons of Jacob and became one of the tribes of Israel. And there's a city called Dan that's in what became known as Galilee in northern modern Israel. And Stela, a stela, S-T-E-L-E, is a monument. It can be either metallic or stone or whatever, and it's got inscriptions on it. And in this case, the stela that they found at Tel Dan was the story told by a Syrian king of a battle that took place that he won. The victors always write the history, you know that. And so he wrote this stela telling how he won this battle over the king of Israel and the king of the house of David. And that was the first time, 1993, that they had found any archaeological evidence of the existence of King David. But since then, they found some other things too, and so there's a lot more background that we know about that time period. But these books, they're told from the standpoint of fictional characters, and that's why I call it biblical historical fiction. The people that we know in the Bible, King David and so forth, they're there, but they're told, the stories are told through the eyes of these fictional characters. Actually, there's three categories of characters. There's the Bible characters that are well known. There's the fictional characters, and then there's kind of a category in the middle. There's a lot of people in the Bible who are mentioned one time. We might not be told their name, but they have, some role to play in the story, and so I take them and give them backgrounds, give them families, give them stories, and so therefore, based on what we know of the culture and so forth, we can kind of follow them. So the first character is, his name is Eldad, and he is a metalsmith in Mizpah, which is, I don't know, about 15 miles northwest of Jerusalem or something like that. Of course, at that time it wasn't called Jerusalem, but because this is before David made it his capital. I'm going to read just a little bit from chapter 3. Eldad has been to the marketplace to sell his wares, his bronze implements and so forth, knives and bells and things that they make at the forge. And he discovered that there was a little problem with some of the quality control in the products that were being made by his brother, Jacob, his younger brother. So he came back and he gave Jacob what for, and then he left the forge, and I'm going to pick it up there as he leaves. Eldad turned angrily and left the forge. It was still light, but the sun would be setting soon. He suddenly realized he was hungry. The family compound was surrounded by a high wall and included 3 houses side by side with shared walls like apartments. Eldad's house was the largest because he was the firstborn son. It had been the house of his father and mother before that, his grandfather. It had been built by Eldad's great-grandfather sometime after Israel conquered Mizpah, and it was claimed for the tribe of Benjamin. Connected to it was a small house for his widowed mother, then Jacob's house. There was room for more, but so far there was no need. As Eldad walked toward a corner of the courtyard where a stone oven stood, he shook off his anger. He came up behind his wife, Hadassah, who was absorbed in the baking of a loaf of pita. So she didn't hear him coming. He wrapped his arms around her. "Oh!" Hadassah exclaimed. At 20 years of age, her slim body was warm and soft in Eldad's embrace, and the smell of baking bread brought feelings of hearth and home. "Oh, what a day I've had." "Be careful," she chided. "Always. When do we eat?" "It appears it will be late," came another voice. It was Eldad's mother, Zemira. Hadassah frowned. "It will be ready soon enough if my husband will stop distracting me." "My son, wash up for supper. You smell of the forge." "It's the aroma of the work which pays for the bread, Mother." "Still, clean up." "Yes, of course, I'm starved." As he went to his house, he saw Jacob's wife, Ophrah, with a tray of food, and their four-year-old daughter, Talia. "The date cakes are ready," Ophrah said. "So we only lack the bread," Zemira looked at Hadassah. "It's almost done. Bring it to the table when it is." "Yes, Mother." Hadassah remained at the oven alone as the others entered the main house. The extended family were all seated on cushions on the floor around a low table which was laden with food. In addition to the pita Hadassah had prepared, there was roasted lamb, greens, and leeks, and Ophrah's date cakes. The tableware was baked clay and bronze spoons and knives. Glazed clay cups held wine and water. Eldad said the blessing as they all bowed their heads. "Blessed are you, Yahweh, our God, ruler of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Amen." "Amen," Jacob repeated, and the family began eating. I'm going to break in here just to say that if you've watched this far, I hope that you will subscribe, like this video, and set the notifications so you won't miss when the next one comes out. Now let's get back to Kona Stories bookstore. So that's the way it starts. And as time goes on, Eldad and Hadassah have 2 sons. The older one is Jeriah, the younger one is Exile. And they grow to adulthood, and by that time King Saul has been crowned, and they create a standing army for the nation. And both Jeriah and Exile join the army, and they are there when the battle takes place in which David kills Goliath. But this act drives a wedge between the two brothers, because by this time Jeriah is part of Saul's personal security detail. He stands before the king every day, and he is the last line of defense for King Saul, and so he is very, very loyal. Exile, on the other hand, finds David very charismatic, and when things start to fall apart, it creates a problem in the family. And so I'm going to read just a little bit from the second book as it gets started in chapter 2. Jeriah, Shelomith stood with her arms crossed over her breasts, her feet planted far apart as she called her husband's name, standing over his sleeping form. He stirred and moaned, sure to be upset at being awakened before dawn, but Shelomith could wait no longer. Belatedly, he opened his eyes. "What is going on with you and your brother?" He looked at her with confusion, then finally spoke. "My brother is a fool." "Or does he have a fool for a brother?" she said, certain it would provoke him. "You heard?" "How could I not hear? It's a small house." Jeriah roused and sat up, lowering bare feet to the floor of the upstairs bedchamber. At 42, he moved slower than when Shelomith had become his bride. Though his shoulders were still broad, hardened as they were by work in the forge and in the service of the king, gray now tempered the black hair at his temples. "Exile puts our whole family in jeopardy." "What? How?" "He favors David over the king," Jeriah explained, rubbing his eyes. "What do you mean? Isn't David Saul's champion?" "Events yesterday may have changed that." "What events?" "Saul tried to kill David." "What? Why would he do that?" "Rumors. Rumors the king apparently believes. That Samuel has anointed another to rule over us, not one of the house of Saul or even of the tribe of Benjamin. And Saul believes David is the one?" "Evidently, and so does Exile." "But why would Samuel anoint another?" Shelomith asked, her anger turning to perplexity. "You were not there in Gilgal when Samuel told the king that the kingdom would be taken from him and given to another with a heart like God's own." "No, why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't want to worry you. I didn't think it would affect our family." "That's what you and Exile were arguing about last night?" "Yes, he said if it comes to it, he will support David against the king." Shelomith could not speak. Words of treason had been spoken in her own house. Her husband daily stood before the king. Would King Saul spare Jeriah, his wife, and their children if Jeriah's brother was a traitor? And so it's going to go on, because I'm writing the third book now, and so the children of Exile and Jeriah are continuing to grow and become adults and carry on, and they will have roles in the things that happen. The third book begins the reign of David, and the fourth will be the second half of David's reign, and then the fifth and sixth, I don't know, will be Solomon's reign. And so that's how that's going to go, if I survive. Yes?
So what is the actual time period that your book covers?
Okay, so that's such a good question, because scholars really don't always agree about chronology, and chronology is really sometimes difficult when you're dealing with the Bible, but That 120 years is roughly split over the turn of the century between the 11th and the 10th century BC. And so basically 1,000 years before Christ.
So your book covers how many years?
120 years. The series covers 120 years.
How many
Yeah.
books is the series?
2 so far.
Yeah, two so far. So this book covers about 40 years, maybe a little more. This book really only covers about 15. It's the period of time when David was being threatened by Saul. It's called Exile of the King because David had been anointed king, but he wasn't king yet, and he had to leave, he had to flee, he had to hide in the wilderness, and finally he had to go and live with the Philistines to keep from being killed by Saul. And so that period of time is what's covered in the second book.
And so at the end of the second book, David is king?
David becomes king at the very beginning of the third book.
Okay.
And in the Bible, the way the Bible tells it, David was king in Hebron, which was the main city of Judah, the tribe of Judah, for 7 years. But there was another king, the fourth son of Saul, was king in the north for about 1.5 years. And so it took a while, but eventually David did become king of the entire region. Okay. Anything else?
All right. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.